If you search for Stoicism online today, you will likely find a collection of life hacks. It is presented as a series of motivational quotes and behavioral heuristics designed to help you optimize a morning routine or endure a difficult workout. But read the original texts from the ancient Greek world, and a completely different philosophy emerges. Classical Stoicism is deeply weird. It demands strict views on the physical nature of matter, absolute cosmic determinism, and formal dialectics. The ultimate goal for the ancient Stoics was human flourishing, what they called ethics. But the founders of the school believed achieving that ethical ideal was impossible without an underlying architecture of physics and logic to support it. Modern adapters attempt to extract the ethical advice while discarding the load-bearing metaphysical and logical pillars that the ancient Greeks engineered to hold that advice up. To genuinely understand the ethical commands of the Stoics, we have to rebuild their complete interdependent system. We cannot simply harvest the parts we find convenient. The Stoics visualized their philosophy as an integrated orchard. In this system, the land and the soil are physics. The protective boundary fence surrounding the property is logic, and the fruit produced by the trees is ethics. The relationship here is literal. The ethical fruit cannot grow without the specific metaphysical soil and the epistemic protection that produce it. Early Greek founders like Zeno of Citium obsessed over determining the best possible human life, and they approached this through a holistic study of the entire universe. Later foundational figures, specifically the third head of the Stoic school, Chrysippus, took these early teachings and systematized them into a comprehensive theory of reality. To understand how a Stoic is supposed to act, we first have to dig into the dirt to understand how a Stoic believes the universe physically operates. The Stoics were strict materialists, holding a view sometimes called corporealism. They argued that absolutely everything that truly exists in reality, including the soul and even God, possesses a physical body. This physical reality is made up of two interacting principles. The first is a primordial, inert material known as the passive principle. The second is an energetic force that shapes it, called the active principle. The Stoics identified this active principle as God, or Zeus, or the Logos. This is not a personal deity, but a rational, structuring life force that flows entirely through the physical universe. The specific mechanism the Logos uses to interact with matter is called pneuma, meaning breath. It is a physical tension that infuses into objects and creatures, endowing them with their unique properties. Because this rational life force dictates every detail of physical matter, the Stoic universe is strictly deterministic. Every event is pre-planned and guaranteed by the Logos. Reality moves through periods of strict order before undergoing a conflagration, a state where the entire universe is consumed by fire. Then the cycle repeats itself. Human beings may act foolishly within this system, but the active principle is capable of taking those dissonant actions and inevitably harmonizing them back into the grand cosmic plan. Nature, in the Stoic view, is thoroughly intentional and inherently good. It is the exact opposite of the random, chaotic universe described by modern science. If the universe is a perfectly ordered, deterministic machine, a human being's ultimate moral imperative is simply to perceive that machine without error. This brings us to the second layer of the orchard, logic, the protective boundary that shields the mind from falsehood. Stoic logic goes far beyond identifying fallacies in an argument. It encompasses epistemology and dialectics, the rigorous study of what is definitively true, false, or neither. To explain how a human mind acquires unshakable knowledge of the world, Zeno used the illustration of a hand. The first step is receiving raw sensory data. An impression is made on the mind, likened to a completely open, splayed hand. The crucial second step is catalepsy. This is the firm assurance that the impression in your mind perfectly matches physical reality. It is an act of assent, represented by closing the hand into a fist. Finally, the opposite hand grips the fist tightly. That specific strength and security represents true comprehensive knowledge. The absolute peak of this logic is the Stoic sage. The sage is an epistemological ideal, a figure who possesses perfect dialectical knowledge and never errs. Only the sage, possessing flawless logical perception, can see the logos working behind reality. That clear perception is the strict prerequisite for perfect ethical action. We finally reach the fruit of the orchard, Stoic ethics. These are the practical guidelines for human behavior that draw most modern readers to the philosophy. The core metric of Stoic virtue boils down to a single objective: living in accordance with nature. You cannot align your actions with nature if you do not physically understand the cosmic logos. Ethical action depends entirely on accurate logical perception of the universe. The output of this alignment yields 4 core virtues: prudence, justice, temperance, and courage. This logic also explains the pervasive myth of the passionless Stoic. The ancient texts do describe the sage as apathetic, but not in the modern sense of being emotionally numb. The sage lacks passion because perfect logical perception prevents the specific epistemic errors that cause irrational distress. They do not suppress their emotions. They simply see reality too clearly to be disturbed by it. This absolute clarity allows the sage to properly categorize external factors like wealth, health, and social status. The Stoics called these preferred indifference. Preferred indifference might make daily survival easier, but strictly speaking, they are entirely irrelevant to whether a human life is actually good. Because true virtue relies purely on internal logical reasoning rather than external outcomes, the Stoics argued that acting rightly is possible in any physical circumstance. Classical Stoic ethics is not a checklist of life hacks. It is the inevitable, logical output of a mind that perfectly understands its place in a deterministic universe. Centuries later in the Roman Empire, the focus of the philosophy began to shift heavily toward practical application. During this era, Stoicism developed an immense cross-class appeal, adopted by individuals at the absolute extremes of the Roman social hierarchy. You have figures like Epictetus, an enslaved man who eventually secured his freedom and taught philosophy to the masses. At the other end of the spectrum is Marcus Aurelius, the emperor holding ultimate global power, desperately trying to emulate the epistemological sage in his private diaries. The surviving texts from these Roman Stoics show a structural change. They still believed in the underlying physics, but they downplayed the complex cosmology to focus closely on behavioral heuristics. The prime example of this applied ethics is Epictetus's dichotomy of control, the strict, practical separation of what is up to us, like our judgments, and what is not up to us, like our bodies or reputations. This Roman pivot optimized the philosophy for daily survival, but by prioritizing the fruit over the soil, it inadvertently laid the groundwork for how the modern world would eventually misunderstand the entire system. Today, modern adapters have completed the stripping process that the Romans started. Modern secular Stoicism entirely discards the logos, the pneuma, and the deterministic causal nexus. This creates an intellectual tension. The ancient Greek system was meticulously designed as a totally interdependent whole. Change one piece and the rest of the architecture collapses. The original comfort of Stoicism, the idea that all suffering serves a rational purpose, requires an absolute belief in a providential, intentional universe. Can a set of ethical rules truly survive and function when severed from the specific metaphysical reality it was engineered to navigate? Modern Stoicism offers powerful coping mechanisms, but ignoring its deeply weird, complex roots means we are settling for the severed branches rather than understanding the living tree.